So, Google just dropped a huge update to its AI research tool, NotebookLM, but the really good stuff was kind of buried in a blog post. So today, we're going to dig into the massive changes that you've probably missed.
And look, let's just kick things off with this quote from Parker Prompts. This is a power user who really put the new version through its paces. And this really sets the stage for everything we're about to talk about.
Yep, you heard that right. A whopping 80% of NotebookLM's new capabilities are basically hiding in plain sight. We're not talking about little tweaks here. We're talking about brand new ways of working that most people just haven't found yet.
All right, so what's actually under the hood here? What changed? Let's start with the core engine, the brain of the whole operation, because this is the foundation for all the other cool stuff.
Think of it like this. The system that actually reads your documents, it got a total brain transplant. The old version had this tiny little window, so if you had a ton of sources, it would only glance at a few of them. That's why you'd get these vague, kind of useless answers. Well, the new system changes all of that.
And this chart really puts it into perspective, right? The amount of stuff the AI can look at in one go has jumped by 8 times. And its memory, how much of your conversation it remembers, is 6 times longer. So no more of that annoying, I forgot what we were talking about stuff in the middle of a complex chat. And here's the payoff. Google's talking about a 50% jump in how good the answers are, especially when you're working with a lot of documents. And testers said, yeah, you can feel that difference immediately. The answers are just sharper, they're more detailed, and they actually pull from sources the old version would have totally ignored. But look, a supercharged engine is great, but it's only half the equation, right? You got to know how to drive it. And that's where this next update comes in. This is a huge piece of that 80% of new power we mentioned.
And this is an absolute game changer. That little box where you tell the AI what to do and how to act, it just went from a tiny 500 characters, that's like 2 sentences, to a massive 10,000. That's a 20 times increase in your ability to actually control this thing.
So what does that mean for you? Well, it means you can stop giving it simple little prompts. Now, you can give it a full-on job description. You're basically turning this generic chatbot into a highly specialized expert that works exactly the way you need it to. So you see the shift? You're not just asking a question anymore. You're telling the AI exactly how to find the answer, how to think about it, and how to present it back to you. You can make it cite its sources, point out where your documents disagree. You can even tell it to never guess. It becomes a serious partner in your research. Okay, so we've got a smarter engine and way better instructions. Now you have the tools to make some really cool stuff. Let's jump into the new studio features that make it even easier to go from raw notes to something polished. You know that audio overview feature? Which was already pretty awesome. Well, it's not a one-trick pony anymore. Instead of just one long deep dive, you can now pick the exact format you need. You want a quick 2-minute summary? Done. You want a critique that points out the weak spots in your sources? You got it. You can even generate a debate between 2 AIs arguing different sides of your research.
And okay, what about the most tedious part of research? Trying to compare data from a bunch of different documents. That's always been this painful, manual copy and paste job. Well, not anymore. With the new Data Tables feature, what used to take hours is now literally 1 click. You just tell it what to look for, and boom, it spits out a perfectly structured table, pulling from all your different documents. And the best part? You can export it right to Google Sheets. This feature alone is a massive time saver.
And it's not just text and audio. Your control over visuals, like infographics and slide decks, it's on a whole new level. You can pick the orientation, tell it how much detail to include, and this is huge, you can just describe the style you want. You could literally type, make it look like a clean editorial magazine, and it'll know what to do.
And that brings us to the last big update. And honestly, this one might be the most important, because for the first time, NotebookLM isn't just a closed box anymore. Your research doesn't have to stay locked inside it.
Here's the new workflow. Step 1. You do your grounded research inside NotebookLM. That means it's based only on your trusted sources. Then, when you're ready to get creative, you can take that whole notebook and plug it directly into the Gemini app as a trusted source.
And why is this such a big deal? Because what you create in Gemini is now based on your hand-picked, verified sources, not just the wild west of the internet's training data. You get all the creative horsepower of Gemini, but it's grounded in the facts from your own work. Okay, so let's pull all this together. A new engine, better chat, a whole creative studio, new ways to connect. What's the one thing you really need to remember? How does this all fit?
Look, all these updates are fantastic. They're all powerful. But that 20x jump in the instruction field, that's the real key. That's the one thing that transforms this from a generic tool into your personal tool. It's what unlocks everything else. Mastering that is how you become a power user.
As these tools get more and more powerful, there's going to be a huge difference between people who just use the defaults and people who really dig in and customize them. And this update is the perfect example of that. 80% of the new power isn't in some shiny new button. It's in knowing how to give better instructions. The real power is in your hands now.